Welcome back, everyone, to episode 9 of the They Fly Now Show podcast. And this week we are going to be talking about my favorite canon book, Lost Stars. So if you have not read it, if you don't want spoilers, just go away. And then if you do want spoilers, listen in because it's an amazing book. I hope everyone in the chat has read it. But we are joined by these two lovely ladies this week. So if you guys just want to get started with introducing yourself, who are you? Where can we find you? And what's your guys' favorite Star Wars novel? Let's go with Julia first.
Hello, I'm looking on YouTube. I have a Spotify symbol, or is that just me? Oh, the podcast. Okay, I just thought I was messing it up. I am so sorry. Hi, I'm Julia Christine, and I am bad at podcasts. Okay, so I got the favorite canon book, but I can't remember what else you asked. What was the first thing you asked?
Just who are you? Where can we find you?
Oh, sure. So yeah, I'm at Julia Christine on TikTok, and then yes, I do have a podcast with Fern at Always Fern, Star Wars English class. We're on a bit of a break right now because we are both English teachers and the school year has started, so we're pretty busy. But our next episode is going to be on Maul and revenge tragedy. So like looking at the genre of revenge tragedy through the lens of his character. So that'll be our next episode when we do come back. And my favorite canon novel, I was just saying that Lost Stars is my favorite non-High Republic canon novel. I would say right now my favorites are The Rising Storm and A Test of Courage are sort of my favorites in the High Republic. Yeah, I guess that's where I'm at. The High Republic, it might be like recency bias, but I do really enjoy these characters. But Lost Stars is definitely in my top 5 for sure.
Yeah, High Republic's amazing. And I also wanted to ask you, do your students know that you make all this content? And if so, do they think that you're like the coolest teacher ever?
They don't know. I mean, if they do know, they haven't mentioned it to me. I specifically try to not reference anything from TikTok when I'm teaching, like not even like memes or like jokes or audios. I don't think there's anything that I would be like, oh, because I'm a huge nerd in class when I'm teaching, so it's not like I would be embarrassed by anything. I just don't need them to know.
What grade do you teach?
So I actually teach at university. So right now I'm teaching a couple different. Most of my students right now are actually upperclassmen, so like juniors and seniors primarily. So they're in their 20s, they're adults.
Gotcha.
But yeah. They don't know. I mean, if they find out, they find out. But I mean, the podcast would probably be like, oh, I have a educational podcast. That would be probably more. They'd find me through that. So
yeah. All right, and same thing to Gray.
Yes, I'm Donna the Gray on TikTok. I go by Gray, and my favorite canon novels, well, it would be Lost Stars is tied with Bloodline. I couldn't pick one over the other. And then my favorite trilogy is the Aftermath trilogy.
Awesome. We've had Gray on before, so I guess welcome back. And then just real quick, why Lost Stars? It's like what about Lost Stars do you guys think makes it kind of special? Gray, if you want to go first.
I love that it's like from a certain point of view, because it's from a different point of view, and it spans darn near the whole entire saga. And so I just love that. I love, as you're just listening to this beautiful story, every bit of the background is all the original and sequel trilogy. And I think that's just wonderful. It's so much fun how they tie it all into it.
Yeah, for sure. And Julia?
Yeah, no, I love that kind of expanded from a certain point of view experience. I think there's something, and I think maybe this is why myself and so many other people are loving the High Republic is like there are so many Star Wars characters, especially in the Skywalker saga time period, that we get over and over again. And there is something special about brand new characters and, you know, making us care about these people that are new and have struggles that are different from the ones that we're used to. And so seeing an alternate perspective to the worlds that we know or the galaxy that we know, and making us care about these sort of quote unquote everyday people who are not Jedi or generals, or they're just kind of average, not in a bad way, but getting a peek into the lives of the sort of the everyday life of a rebellion, someone who actually is part of the Empire, and then building in this like tragic, you know, star-crossed lovers story in the middle of it. I'm literally teaching Romeo and Juliet right now, so it's perfect timing for me. I think The Lost Stars, I think it's all purposeful. It's a reference to Romeo and Juliet. Building that in to the Empire and the rebellion is just such a natural choice. And so melding that together is just so brilliantly done. And yeah, I'm a big fan of Claudia Gray. It's just a very well-written book.
Yeah, I know, like first time reading it, get to the end and just like start to tear up. No, why does it have to be like this? But before we get started, I'm going to shout some people out in the chat. So shout out to X-Core Gamer Skills, Kieran Barr, Charlie Johnson, aka Char J, Captain Pennsylvania. Who is that? Your friend Gray?
Yes, that's my bed.
Okay, that's what I thought. So thank you guys all for joining us. And then real quick, I'm just going to do this now rather than at the end. Coming soon, so we're kind of just doing 10 episode seasons for They Fly Now. So we're on episode 9 now, then episode 10 next week, and then episode 11 we're going to be completely redesigned and we're going to start uploading to Spotify and all this cool stuff. So just to keep that kind of on your guys' plate, that we're going to be completely redesigning in the next few weeks, and it's going to be awesome.
That's great.
Very exciting.
Yes. Woohoo.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the way Jillican pushed them towards the academy is when towards the empires, when the empire came down there to annex their world, it brought people, work, modern technology, and that's very enticing, especially for a more backwater area that struggles. So I think that's why their planet was so for the Empire. They're a struggling planet with not very much, and then they come to bring all this prosperity to them. And then, you know, and Ciena's parents, they supported the Empire thoroughly. Well, both Thane and Ciena's parents both supported the Empire, but due to Ciena being raised with honor above all and her word above all, is more enticing for her to go and stay, where Thane had a totally different upbringing. And so I think that those two different upbringings are just so polar opposite. I think that's what contributes to their opposites in the book later on.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Julia, same thing to you.
Yeah. I think, it's really interesting. We were just talking about some of the sequel novels and seeing how it's kind of similar to what happens if you've read like Phasma or Black Spire, where the First Order is bringing the stability and quote unquote prosperity. And so I think a lot of that, like Grace said, I totally agree. There's a system in place there that brings advancement and opportunity, and it sort of hinges on this total control. And it's very, I think, reminiscent of a lot of real world ways in which like certain people don't have the good choices that other people have. And I think it's interesting, especially if we think of Luke, like how is he going to get off of Tatooine? He has the same plan that Thane and Sienna have, which is to go to the Imperial Academy and become a pilot and have that be his route off of this backwater planet, right? So I think that's a really fun parallel. And thinking of rural, isolated places, even here on planet Earth, don't have the same opportunities. And so you have to kind of take what you get. And it's not that, you know, people talk about like bad choices versus did you have good choices to make and sort of what opportunities were presented to you. Not everyone is Leia, who has this sort of grand opportunity to essentially become a leader of the rebellion. And that's super interesting to me. And I love that like political analysis is in the book and that it's not sort of shied away from. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I totally agree with Gray's analysis there. It's kind of like, what other choice did they really have? If you want to leave, what options do you have to leave?
Mm-hmm. Since you're mentioning the sequels, if you haven't read it, I would say Jalukhan is very just divided. So like the people who are at the top are really far at the top and the people at the bottom are really far at the bottom. Kind of almost like a Canto Bight, I would say. Would you guys say those two planets are pretty similar in the way that they have like an economical divide?
I don't know that much about Canto Bight.
I think it's definitely, I mean, Canto Bight is like extreme wealth. So it's not as severe, I would say, but I definitely agree that it's the type of place where like the difference between, like when you look at somewhere like Naboo or Alderaan, it seems like it's more egalitarian. There's sort of prosperity that's spread out among most people. And there are people who are more powerful and less powerful, but there's not a huge divide. But I would agree. It's similar to like a Canto Bight, not as extreme, but like, there is a disparity on Jalukhan. I don't know how I didn't listen to the audiobook, so I say Jalukhan. Okay, Jalukhan. I've been saying Jalukhan.
I was saying Jalukhan
fascinating. But is it Jalukhan from the audiobook?
Yeah.
That sounds like Jello can.
Jalukhan.
I'm just gonna start calling it Jello can, like a can of Jello. It's fine.
I could relate to Sienna wanting to leave. I grew up in kind of like she did, pretty strict in the belief system and with like no power, running water. The closest like stoplight was like 18 miles from my house. And so I would have done anything to get out of there. Anything, even join the Empire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you think that so like growing up the way Sienna did and then kind of comparing how Thane grew up, because Thane really grew up in kind of a polar opposite way and taught different morals. So what differences about Thane and Sienna's upbringing kind of stand out to you guys? Julia, if you want to just go first.
I think it's, I love getting to see the differences that already exist between them. And then as it's just a great little writer thing where then those can be expanded upon later and sort of start to build this wedge between them, but they're established right away. And you brought up the power disparity and like the idea that if you have power, you can get away with things that you wouldn't get away with. And unfortunately, the power on Jalukhan is based a lot in corruption. And so that's the type of stuff that Thane's family, I mean, he obviously is a very good soul. He doesn't want to sort of live the same way, but he's definitely taught that like, you can, it's interesting because I think it's supposed to be like, you would expect Thane to be the one who would eventually be the hardline Imperial based on like how he was raised with like this powerful family and being taught to kind of use that power to get what you want, versus someone who was raised in this more traditional culture where honor was everything. You would think, oh, that means doing the right thing. And I love that it's not what you expect. And so I think a big part of how they're upbringings are established is to like psych you out and think you kind of know who's going to end up on what side, and then it's not what you expect. So from a like structural perspective, I think it does a good job of that.
Yeah, definitely. And Gray?
Thane's, I feel like Thane's dad, he and mom and brother basically ran him away. They didn't want anything to do with him ever. And so for Thane, becoming a pilot and joining the Empire was just a strict means to get away from Jelucan and his family, where Ciena loved her planet and her family, but she wanted, because of their pride and their need to excel and serve, that's what took her to the Empire. So it was two very different reasons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Thane's brother, because growing up, Thane's parents make it seem like his brother is some big giant hotshot kind of that joins the army, and then once we actually see him in the Empire, he's like under Thane. And I think it's really funny.
It's so sweet.
Yeah. It's great.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Mm.
I thought when they were flying together and shooting down all the little rock spires, and they could just feel each other's movements and finish each other's sentences, I really enjoyed that. It never became romantic. It was just a beautiful young friendship that they were just working together to help each other succeed, and that was my favorite part of it. I did like the little backdrop of how they met with Admiral Tarkin, and I thought that was a lot of fun as well. That one stuck out a lot.
Mm-hmm.
He jump scares you at the beginning of the novel. You're like, oh my god, it's Tarkin, and then you like you kids be good for the Empire, and they're like, okay, and you're like, this is wow, this is a really interesting way to start this book.
A grandpa.
I know, it's a very
all nice and reputable.
I know, it's so interesting. Yeah. No, it's like, yeah, it's so fascinating. Yeah. Anyway, just thinking. Now I'm just thinking about Tarkin. Yeah, no, I'm trying to kind of like think of anything that sticks out. I would say I agree with Gray in terms of like, having this strong friendship that eventually sort of builds this romance, but as children, like, they're kids, and it's not something that really comes up, and they have this bond that's pre-existing, and I think that is necessary so that when they get torn apart, we care, without there even being a romance there necessarily first. The idea, like, I love it's very basic, but the idea that flying is freedom, or like the amount of times that we see characters want to become pilots as a means of freedom, and like it's sort of symbolic, and seeing, like Gray was mentioning, like how they sort of just vibe with each other when they're flying, and seeing that as like a representation of freedom and sort of how it brings out the best in them, is probably the moment that really stands out to me as well. Thinking about like Hera in the Bad Batch, and this idea that being a pilot is this means of escape, and like I just think that's such a great motif that keeps being brought up over and over again. So seeing how that is something they both wanted so desperately, that's probably what stands out to me the most.
Yeah. And something I don't think either of you kind of touched on was the cave, or like the little hangout spot. I feel like that really just kind of, I feel like that is there. Like that is Thane and Ciena. That little hangout spot. And and obviously later in the book they come back to it, and it's just like it hurts,
I agree. It's
but
very perfect.
yeah, it's so
Yeah.
perfect. And
I wish
then
I could remember what they called their hangout.
Oh yeah, that's trying to remember.
I could look. I'll look.
Let's see. Can I just happen to magically perfectly turn to it? That's a great
It's
question.
like rolling off is like just not quite there.
Yeah. It's now we're all just like we're like let's just
Sorry.
stop for a second
No, you're good.
to look up this thing. Yeah, I can't remember it, but having like a secret hideout is just such a fun little, and then coming back to it and like the loss of innocence that's occurred. It's just such a great thing to add since we see these characters over such a long period of time. Yeah.
I also think it's really cute how Thane brought all the nice stuff, but Sienna made herself feel better by bringing all the like warm furs and rugs because they were like more cherished and handmade. So she made herself feel better by saying they were more important. I thought that was cute.
Very true.
Yeah. And I really like how this novel kind of just skips through like their life. Like, oh, here's something that happened when they were 8. Here's something that happened when they were 13. Here's something that happened when they were 16. And then finally, in this whole time as they're growing up, the end goal is to go to the Imperial Academy, become a high-ranking Imperial officer, and that's how they're going to succeed in life. So what do you guys think of kind of Coruscant's portrayal in the book? Let's start with Gray.
I enjoyed it. I liked the little academy parties. I liked how when they first got there, Sienna was just ecstatic and excited, and Thane was the one all nervous and like, oh my gosh, everything's so big. And he, you would think that it would have been opposite because they feel like the first waivers feel like they're superior to the second waivers because they have more stuff. And so I thought that was really good. When Thane first gets to the academy and he knocks on his dorm room door and they're like, why would you knock on your own dorm room? Like, why would you do that? And I thought all the young collegey stuff was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Sorry, my headphones cut out there for a little bit, so I think I missed part of what Gray was saying. So I caught the end part, but
no, you're good.
Yeah, same question to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's you kind of know that it's the top school, and I agree that kind of collegey stuff. But I also just think the idea of Coruscant being like a culture shock is really fun because we as like readers, as audience, are really familiar with it, and so it is, overwhelming, right? I know many of us are like, I would never want to live there, but it's not shocking to like experience it and to see it be this like crazy, shocking place that's unfamiliar and strange, as opposed to like, yeah, that's where Obi-Wan lives at the temple. Like he walks the temple and then he goes to Dex's, and like having it be this place that's like a culture shock was really a fun way to kind of re-experience it. That's kind of the thing that stands out to me. Kind of like recently, kind of a spoiler for Out of the Shadows, when Imri goes to Coruscant for the first time, and this poor empathic boy is just like sobbing because he's so overwhelmed by the sheer emotions of this sort of huge, planet-wide city. So that I thought that was really fun because it's such a place we're so familiar with. So seeing it in a different light was.
I agree with Julia.
Yeah. We also, as readers, we know kind of all the crap at this time, like what's going on in Coruscant, and that it's not this, like, it's not this perfect place that they kind of make it out to seem like. It's like, oh, I want to go to Coruscant because Coruscant's the best. In reality, Coruscant's at the time of the Empire is just very, very flawed.
Yeah.
Right. And it's so interesting because Coruscant, like it didn't exist when the original trilogy came out, right? Like it wasn't a place that like existed. And so seeing it put into the backdrop of like, yeah, it's like the center of the galaxy. It's Palpatine has his palace in the, you know, Jedi Temple and all this stuff that came after. To see that built in, kind of like Ray was saying about from a certain point of view, but like not for people, but like for places, because they never go to Coruscant in the original trilogy. They don't mention it because it hadn't been invented yet. But to see it kind of put in now in canon, and to see just like you're saying, like it's not somewhere you want to be, but they don't necessarily know that, and that's a little dramatic irony that we have as readers. It's like, oh no, this is not. This is the seed of all evil. You don't want to be here.
Yeah,
Definitely. So obviously, like Gray has talked about the way they like portray the Imperial Academy is like it's kind of like a weird mix between like a college dorm and like army barracks. So it's like obviously since the Empire is what we know them as in all of Star Wars and what we see in like stuff like Rebels and that kind of stuff. I was gonna ask the question of what are you guys' thoughts on how the Empire stripped down Thane and Sienna's like identity and culture from like Julia Khan, and I'll start with Julia this time since we got great last time.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the most interesting things is there's obviously the lore of like, wait, how does this actually function? Like, what is this academy like? How are they trained? But like the propaganda, and I don't want to be able to say like brainwashing. I don't know that it's that extreme. But the way in which they are encouraged to take on, like, the only identity that matters is your imperial one, and that's the self that you need to become in order to succeed. And I think it's interesting to see, sorry, I'm constantly talking about things that are spoilery from other things, but like in the Bad Batch, how Rampart is kind of talking about the merits of soldiers, not clones, is they do have to sort of become these imperial citizens and have that be their number one identity, and to see that actually put into practice. I mean, I think the uniformity, and I think the main thing, the way that they kind of strip it down, is like success and advancement is tied to being this perfect imperial soldier, and that is how you succeed. And so if you want to succeed, you have to put all of your focus and effort into this way of life. There's no time or space for anything else. And so if you want to do well, and Sienna and Thane both do, Sienna especially, if she wants to succeed, she has to do exactly what they tell her to do. And if that's what you want in life, and the only way you can get it is to put work 20 hours a day to achieve it, becoming this perfect imperial, then you're going to do it. And so it's directly tied to advancement, which I think is how they get you. So.
Yeah. Gray.
I agree with Julia on that. And then if you see how they strip them away, remember the where the whole class had to build a weapons gun of some sort, cannon out of spare parts, and the Empire already was watching Thane and Sienna. They did this bike race where their speeders linked together. And it was supposed to be something nobody could fly because they would just crash. But because Thane and Sienna were so in tune, they actually did everything just in flow, and they finished together. And the guy who was running the class was like, oh, well, if you're going to work together, then you're going to split the winnings. So they split the winnings, and Sienna was kind of sore about it, but she didn't mind as much because it was Thane. And so the Empire is already like, we don't like these two kids from this back hills place like Tatooine showing up, all of our generals' kids, all the Coruscant elites' kids, and so they wanted to knock them down a peg, and they used a special sect of the of their school to sabotage Thane's test and make it look like Sienna did it. But then they did some underline coding to make it look like Thane sabotaged his own test to set, and so Sienna did not like that Thane believed that the school did this on purpose, and because she doesn't ever say anything negative of the Empire or their education, and it tore them apart, I think, for a couple years.
Yeah.
like
I think
years.
that happened maybe
In their first,
freshman year, right?
Like after
Yeah.
1 year, because I remember
And
him saying, "Oh, we have to
then
redo a whole year of our academy."
yeah, and then they would like see each other in the hallways and give each other dirty glances
Mhm.
until
Mhm.
finally,
And so the
like, I think
Empire is so, they want everybody to just be all about the Empire that they cared enough to rip these two friends apart. Like they are
Yeah.
petty, and it just shows the like petty nature of the Empire.
Yeah. The idea that they would have each other to rely on and
Mhm.
this pre-existing friendship is not acceptable. And yeah, the lengths they go to break them up and to make them more obedient individuals is really, like you said, it's petty, but it's also like insidious.
Mhm.
The way in which this programming is so extensive.
and it shows big differences between the Empire and the Rebellion, because the Rebellion is all about building these bonds and building these friendships, in contrast, the Empire is like wanting to just completely tear down all previous attachments that you've built prior to your Empire days.
Yeah.
And if you listen to the Tarkin book, having people like Tarkin in like the lead positions is pretty brutal as well.
Yeah,
Definitely.
absolutely.
And then if you go to the Black Spire book, which is like the sequel to Phasma, that one shows a bunch of different stuff on how far they're willing to go to catch like one person and to, just to destroy the rebels.
Yeah, and like you guys, like Carter and everyone has brought up so far, like I just love how Lost Stars just kind of like draw that like differences of like rebellion and empire. It's like because like the rebellion's all about like, again, like you said, the attachments and like getting and fighting for a cause and that kind of stuff. While the empire is more of like kind of like no individualism, you serve the purpose, don't question anything, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And like the idea of, this is something I was going to mention earlier. The idea that the Empire could give you an identity and a purpose is something that, like, I think Sienna, like, very obviously, I don't want to say falls prey to, but she finds really attractive. It's a way not just to like support her family and to bring them pride and honor, but it's an identity, and you can see throughout the book how, like, no, this is who I am, becomes really crucial. And it's a good example of how your work, or like what you do, can overtake your identity, as opposed to like the way something sort of inherent to who you are, and how that can be manipulated. Like her best qualities are manipulated for this machine, and it's a tragedy. Sorry, English teacher moment. If she has a tragic flaw, it is honor, and that's a really great tragic flaw to have for a character to have, because it's very understanding and sympathetic, and it's a great one to twist and see how even the best, most noble virtues a character can have can be flawed if sort of in the wrong environment. Like, this is a great, quality to have, but if you can never compromise and can never, make hard decisions that go against your idea of honor, like, it can be just as tragic as being, a bad quality. So I love that is so central to her identity and gets so wrapped up in her being an Imperial officer. And it's great.
Yeah, that is some A1 English teacher analysis. That's amazing. That is so good. I never really thought about it kind of that way. Now back to the Imperial Academy. They make these friends, and I think the friends can represent, like, I think each of them kind of represents something. And how do you kind of think that each of their friends, so that would be like Kendi, Jude, and Nash, I would say would be the big main three friends. I think they have a few others, right?
Yeah, but those are
but they're like
Side
kind of
Side
irrelevant.
characters.
The
Yeah.
irrelevant ones. So how do you think that their friend group kind of affected them throughout their time at the Imperial Academy? Whoever wants to go first.
I've been cheating off of Gray, so I'm kind of waiting.
Well, Tendi, she's like the swimmer, the islander.
Yeah.
And so when she first gets to the academy, she has to wear shoes. She's like, oh, I have to wear shoes. And she has like wild, crazy hair. And she's like, I have to pull my hair back. And Ciena's like, why haven't you been practicing this? And so, she's like the fun one to get Ciena to loosen up a little bit. And then Jude is like the science head. I mean, everything science. She speaks the language of the cosmos, math and science.
Mhm.
And the one funny, and she's from Bespin, Cloud City. And one thing that sticks out to me about her is all she talks about is science stuff, and the way she works, everything is very scientific, and what she wants to do, everything's very scientific. And like Ciena went to Bespin at one point, and she was like, oh my gosh, how beautiful is this? That's just like Jude to not say how pretty it is, because she only speaks like science talk. And so I thought they were really fun, like polar opposites, and then Ciena's kind of in the middle. And then Nash would be my least favorite character of the book. He gets kind of radicalized and goes some way that I can't wrap my brain around too well. So he's kind of meh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do not stand Nash.
Yeah.
Nash he's fascinating because like you're saying, it's kind of hard to wrap your mind around someone who would be, a victim to losing your entire planet and
you
still...
start the First Order, you're like one of the main people.
I'm gonna double down.
Yeah.
It's just so radicalized. It's
I talk a lot about the sunk cost fallacy, or the idea that at this, Nash is committed. You've committed so much to something, it would be to admit that you were wrong. And so what are you going to do? Are you going to admit that you were wrong, or are you going to double down and commit? And that's sort of the fallacy is for many people.
Ciena
they think
too,
that, they think that they think there's no way out, and that they have to just commit to the prior decisions they've made, as opposed to making a new path. And that radicalization is fascinating because, again, that's something politically that people can do here on Earth, which is like, why are you voting against your own interests, for example, where you see people voting for candidates that you would think would be not good for them or not support the policies that would help improve their lives. And you're like, well, I don't understand why these people are making these decisions. And it's something that people are complicated beings, and we do things that don't make a lot of sense sometimes. And I think he's a really fascinating character to include, to show that, like, it's not as, to us, it might seem black and white, but to the people living in these worlds, there's some complexity to the way that they understand and experience this galactic civil war.
I love your opinion on that. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, like, I wouldn't say that, like, I like him as a person.
No.
But as a character, I think it's the idea that someone from Alderaan would double down and support the Empire even harder is so interesting. And I think that's a great, like, Claudia Gray special, where it's like, no, I'm going to create a radical Imperial supporter from Alderaan, and also this rock who you're going to fall in love with in this book, where you're just like, man,
I love that
you're
rock.
just like you're showing off at this point. Jude, I mean, it's so fitting, right? Like, this scientist becomes a victim of the science. Like, that is very fitting for her and very tragic. And I also think it's a good example of, like, a character who, this is just her job. Like, she doesn't seem, I don't remember, I haven't read the book in a while, I don't feel like she ever expresses a lot of political opinions. It seems like to her it's about the work. And the idea that there are people in the Empire who like this is just their day job.
She does express one opinion later when Ciena was talking about the destruction of Alderaan and how she was kind of happy that the Death Star was destroyed, but then Jude was like, she was like, oh, it wouldn't be okay if they built this other Death Star, and then Jude was like, oh, but they had to build a Death Star to, you know, reassert their power because they lost the one to like just this group of rebels, and so I thought that was kind of interesting how Jude, you thought, she did, but she was, you know, kind of radicalized just along with Nash.
Yeah, that's very true. I couldn't remember if she had political. She's not as political, but then that's a good example of like that radicalization. And then, like I said, I love when a character falls victim to like their major trait. I'm just like, that's fun. I mean, it's not fun. It's very sad, but also like, yeah, that's how the scientist character should die. You know what I mean? Enough. Like that's the only way for them to go. So yeah, and I think Kendi is great to have the example of someone who does try to hold on to their culture, and to have that, you know, foil to Ciena, who's, you know, what she holds on to her culture is what she can repurpose for the Empire, as opposed to Kendi, who seems to be like, no, like I'm not going to forget where I came from. So yeah.
I feel like Nash is almost like the perfect product of what the Empire is trying to do with brainwashing. Because like you guys said, literally brainwash him to the point where they explode his own planet, and he's still. It's like, oh.
Cardinal from Phasma and Black Spire, it goes on to say how his brainwashing was done by the Empire, and they even play brainwashing stuff while they sleep.
Yeah.
So even while they sleep, they get the Imperial garble in their ears.
Yeah. Read Black Spire. That is
I highly recommend that.
It's the wildest Star Wars book I have ever read. It is half advertisement for Galaxy's Edge, half serious political analysis, and it's to see those two things come into conflict is an experience. They'll be like describing all the things you can buy at Disneyland, and then they'll talk about like xenophobia, and you're like, what is happening?
But make sure you read Phasma first, because it's kind of a part two.
But they're both really good. But yeah, Black Spire is hilarious. I read it before going to Galaxy's Edge for the first time. I did the reading so that when I was there, I could be like, this is what this is. But yeah, it's so funny because the main character arrives on Batuu and has to be introduced to the planet, which is just like an advertisement for all the different places you can shop.
But and they did it in a tasteful way.
It was done tastefully. It's done tastefully, but it is very amusing to have that contrasted with, like you said, like, I was brainwashed as a child, and you're like, this is what's happening. Sorry, tangent. Anytime someone brings up Black Spire, I have to encourage people to read it, because I'm not sure. Every time I think of it, I'm like, is that a real book that I read? And then I have to be reminded that it does actually exist. And Gray, thank you. That
yes, I can.
It's not a fever dream I had. It's a real book that I read.
It's not a fever dream.
Yeah, no, it's an excellent book. I highly recommend it.
My heart is still broken over that character. So
I'll cry. Yeah. Listen, I'll cry.
No, I will too. It's a lot.
I'll actually cry. So.
Yeah, but now since
I will cry like right now.
I will actually cry. I'm not. I'll do it. I promise.
Oh, God.
I'll probably have to get that because I'm almost done with like my first kind of wave of, because I just started reading canon novels probably 6 months ago, if that, not even, probably like 3 months ago.
Force Collector's really good too. I can go on about that one.
Yeah, I'll have to check it out just because I'm almost done with like my first like 9 books or whatever that I bought. So now I'm gonna have to reorder another 9 that like I'll get into. But anyway, back to Lost Stars. Yeah, I think we covered the Imperial Academy really well because, again, I think that the big things are that the Empire is brainwashing, and we see them do that super successfully as if like a Nash and Sienna, and then you have people like Kendi and Thane who it kind of doesn't really work so well on them.
Yeah.
And then Hereth, you know.
Yeah, I can take that. So obviously, after the Imperial Academy, we kind of get like a really slow, nice transition into the original trilogy with A New Hope, and obviously, mainly the stuff that happened with A New Hope is we have like the two main big moments. So obviously, we have like Sienna's life and Thane's life, and of course that like we already talked about like their friend group and how all that is affected, and we have this one big pivotal moment that kind of just causes Lost Star to just kind of like it's kind of like I would say like this is like the big first like fall in action moment where you're like what the hell. I would say so. I have to ask how did the destruction of Alderaan affect mainly the cast of Lost Stars?
Yeah.
So I'll start with Gray since Julia.
I went on a little tangent.
So with Nash, who is the one Nash Windrider, he's from Alderaan. He had long Alderaan hair that he wore braided tight up against the back of his neck because Alderaanians, they don't cut their hair and they wear a lot of braids and whatnot. And he was actually on the Death Star's bridge or whatever it is when they fired upon Alderaan, and he just basically finished his shift and went into his room. He's already really tall and skinny. I picture kind of like how Tarkin is. And they said that he lost a bunch more weight and cut off all of his hair after the destruction of Alderaan. But he never really talked about it. And then Sienna did bring it up once. And he was like, they destroyed my planet for nothing. You know, because she was trying to express how she didn't like the second Death Star. And he was like, well, they have to build it or they would have destroyed my planet for nothing. And he couldn't handle that his planet was destroyed. And to make there be a reason for it, he doubled down. And that was pretty sad. Tendi, she saw the destruction of the planet and started to like really retreat away from the Empire. And Sienna, she didn't like it, but she had a really good knack of ignoring what she didn't like.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see a lot of like justifying.
Well, she justifies, but one thing I don't see people talking about in her justification, and I think it's the biggest justification of her staying in the Empire, is that if the good leave the Empire, that only leaves the evil. And so that is the only thing that actually kept me liking her is that I felt that she stayed for that reason. And that's
yeah. No, that's a really just thinking of that TikTok audio that like that's a really good point, Diane. I don't mean it that way.
Really good point,
that is actually very good. I mean, I kind of have a more black and white view of like, so a while back, Chaco made that TikTok that was like, can you be a good person and serve the Empire? And like one of my favorite stitches was just Nikolai von Karsten going no, and because like I do truly believe like the answer is no, and I agree. Yeah, no, like if you like, and I love Sienna's sort of, you know, usually when you see a character being like the villain who doesn't know they're a villain, and I'm not saying she's a villain, it's not as nuanced as that, where like she believes she's a good person and is doing what needs to be done to help the galaxy. And I think, see, that's such a great moment. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think the irony there is like, no, if you were, that's why the good people are leaving, the quote unquote good people, because you can't rectify these two things. Which is when you hear people saying like, oh, like the average so-and-so, like they didn't know, blah, blah, blah. And yeah, we don't know about each individual person's soul, and like the sanitation worker versus someone like Sienna, who's an officer who has what knowledge about Alderaan and about the Death Star. But I do think it's a really crucial moment where she has this like cognitive dissonance of thinking, no, I have to stay to be a good person, when in reality, being a good person would mean leaving. So
For sure.
I think that's a really a really great little moment.
And it goes to show, like, remember when Callus is put on that planet, ice planet with Zeb, and then they become friends. And when Callus goes back to the Empire, and this is why I say, no, you can't be a good person. Nobody was, is like, no, there wasn't in any of the Star Wars. You never see somebody, oh, how are you doing today? Like actually caring about another human being. And that even goes down to everybody, the extra people and stuff, nobody ever cares. And so they really drill all caring out of you. And so I definitely agree with the no, you cannot be a good person and serve the Empire. And you know, Ciena, she's a war criminal. So
yeah, I mean, to be fair, lots of characters in Star Wars but she is one of them that is in fact a war criminal. Callus is such a great example of someone who, like, once that awareness was a human, I was going to say a human being, a person, that is not a human, but he's a person, showed him
caring,
treated him as a person, cared about him. And that was like, once that door was open, he was like, wait a second, like, this is bad. Wait, what I'm doing is bad. Like, I didn't realize, and all it took was someone to treat him like a person and to care about him. And I think that's such a great example of, like, the lack of care and concern for each individual person in the Empire. They're cogs in a machine. Like, there's not, and that's contrasted with the Empire, where, like, later, whoever Zane's, like, commander is like, well, I can't keep you here. Like, you have autonomy.
It's
and,
a volunteer army.
Yeah, and, like, that's such a difference. And anyway, now I'm just thinking about Callus and Zeb, and I hope they're happy together.
Sorry, I find these books tied to other books and other Star Wars things, and in my brain I have to bring them all to make my point. Sorry about that.
I'm the same way. No, but Callus is another great example of, like, a defector where, like, it's different because we don't know as much about, like, Zane. We know his whole backstory, and we can get a little bit of, like, kind of what maybe radicalized Callus in terms of his, like, squad or whatever. But it's interesting the things that, like, get people to defect. It's like the destruction of an entire planet, and for Callus it was like someone was nice to him one time, and I just think that's really fun.
Callus is a bad dude. I think it's like is it the second episode where Callus encounters Kanan, and then they're like hanging on that little beam, and there's like a stormtrooper on him. He's like, "Was that a Jedi?" And Callus just kicks the stormtrooper off, and he falls to his death.
Yeah.
You're like,
he does kill that man.
Yeah.
He just kicks him off.
I totally forgot about that.
Do you think he had to send a message to their family to be like, sorry, I guess? He's dead. I apologize, I guess.
Like, he looked, like, literally, the guy just looked at him funny. Or
we
he
should
just asked him.
Sorry, I interrupted.
No, you're good.
We should add in that Ciena, she was a twin. And twins in Star Wars are a rarity and a big deal. But her twin died right after birth. And so she wears this leather bracelet, and she wears it her whole life. And she even wears it at the academy, but she does remove it and put it in her pocket, and she hides it. It's the only thing that she does against the Empire, because the Empire was trying to strip every familial anything from you. And so she does keep that. And you see her periodically in her life say, "Look through my eyes." And it's, she touches her bracelet, and it's supposed to be the window for her dead sister to live and see the world. And that becomes important later.
Yeah. It's like, it's her conscience, which I think is really brilliant, to kind of have this idea that this memory of this sibling, you know, who didn't get to live, sort of acts as the conscience. Because imagining, like, well, what would she think if she could see what I'm seeing? And I just, that's such a brilliant little detail to include.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I think we all kind of forgot about the whole, her sister and the necklace, but then eventually the Empire.
You guys,
it is a
how many pages
big
is this thing?
It is.
It's there's a lot in here. It's like 550 pages. So But yes, thank you.
It
Chris,
helps
for
that I've
bringing that up.
listened to it like 10 times. So
Yeah.
I'm totally ADHD and I don't retain the first or second time and I start to really pick it up. So I have to listen to things a handful of times.
No, you're good.
It's like the first time is like getting the story,
Mhm.
and then it's just like details after that.
Yeah.
But
Definitely.
then the Empire does take the bracelet away, correct?
But that's later. That's
Yeah.
way later in the book, near the end.
Yeah. So obviously, again, like I said, we have two big moments in A New Hope. We have again destruction of Alderaan, and then similar question of obviously we have the destruction of the Death Star, and obviously have to ask the same question of how did it affect the Class of Lost Stars, because obviously it's a massive moment for Thane's development.
Yeah.
So I'll go to Julia this time.
Yeah, I'm like I said, it's been a while since I've read it. So like when I think about the destruction of the Death Star, the thing that really stands out to me is actually Jude. So that's kind of, is that the second Death Star that she's on?
She's
Jude's
on
on the first.
She's on the
First one.
I think
Yeah.
I misspoke earlier when I said she was talking to Jude about the.
Oh, no worries. Yeah.
I couldn't remember it. Like I don't know why that's the thing that stands out to me. So you might want to go to Grace first if you're thinking specifically about Thane, because in my mind, what I think about is more Sienna and Jude when I think about the Death Star. But yeah, that's kind of what sticks out to me, I guess. But I have to think on that one. Sorry, I didn't do adequate preparation. I did not reread the 550 page book.
No worries. No worries.
Well, I think the destruction of the Death Star affected Thane, and it was the catalyst for him to go to the Empire, to leave the Empire and become a rebel, to defect, and he didn't know if Sienna survived it, and it just started him seeing how evil the Empire was. And then his next station on a planet, he would fly his TIE fighter around and it would just scare the people. The noise of it would scare the people into submission. And so he just kept seeing the brutality of the Empire. And the reason Sienna stayed is for her, her pride, and that's what their family does. But for him, he was like, oh my gosh, I'm working for horrible people like my dad. Yeah. And that one statement, he could not stay. Yeah. He could not be around somebody who was evil like his dad. And then Sienna lost her friend Jude on the Death Star, and it kind of radicalized her to want to destroy the rebels for killing her friend. And she just was like, oh, they killed my friend, and so it didn't matter what the Empire did. It didn't matter that they destroyed a whole planet. She lost her friend, and so she stayed in the Empire and did everything she can to track down the rebels because of that. And like I said, I'm actually not that fond of Sienna. The way she makes excuses for everything, and she changes the reality to what she needs to believe to do what she needs to do. And, she betrays her family and all kinds of stuff. And so I have a rough time with her, but I do adore Thane. Yeah. Definitely.
Your focus determines your reality.
Yeah.
So, that can be used for evil as well as good. Yeah. The thing about Thane's dad, I just immediately thought of no, I'm not giving up my dream, Dad. I'm giving up yours. But that dream is the Empire, which I think is really fun. A lot of people, if they're trying to be edgy, will be like, oh, well, who killed all these people on the Death Star? I'm like, it's a military base, it's a military target. It's not a planet full of civilians. You were working on a weapon of mass destruction. It's very sad that they all died, but also it's not the same. And I think that the book does a good job of representing how Sienna feels like, no, this is terrible and they deserve revenge. And it's like, none of this would have happened. And the purpose of this thing was as a weapon, and Alderaan was a planet of people who were not a military target. So The
Thank
rules
you
of
for
engagement here
clarifying that.
are very clear. People who want to, give Luke Skywalker all of, you murdered. I don't know how many people are on the Death Star. It's
Millions.
like, congratulations, you saw Clerks or whatever. But like, it's a military base. The rules of engagement in war are pretty clear in terms of like whether or not this would be everything he did. It's very serious, but also next time, don't work on a weapon of mass destruction. That's what I have to say.
Yeah.
That's my advice. I'm sorry, Jude, but that's my advice for next time is to find a different job.
And Jude, before she actually died, she found the flaw in
Yes.
the Death Star.
Yep.
I was just gonna bring that up. That's so funny.
Me and Carter were laughing about that. We were making this.
She found the flaw that Galen Erso put in the Death Star, and then she submitted that to the officers, and they were like, no, nobody can kill this giant thing, whatever.
2017. Okay, I just had to look up to be like, I always love seeing like how little things are seeded, and like if this was published after Rogue One, so that kind of makes sense. But it's always fun too when things like come out before, and then like to see things from books like make their way like into movies and stuff. So yeah, that is a great little moment.
Mm-hmm.
R.I.P. Jude. I'm sorry that this happened to you.
But you're like, we're not, because you were on the Death Star.
It's bad that they're all dead, but also don't blow up the planet next time. I'm very worried there's going to be comments talking about how terrible I am, but I'm right. So
I agree with you.
You're not wrong.
Just don't be on the giant thing called the Death Star.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a pretty good rule is to ask. Yeah.
I'd ask for a transfer.
Yeah. Can I maybe like the Life Star? Is the Life Star available? Can I work on the Life Star? What would the Life Star be? Is that the Starlight Beacon?
Starlight Beacon.
That's what I was going to say. They already have a Life Star.
Well, they don't. It doesn't exist during this time period.
Right.
So very excited to see the terrible thing that happens to it.
Yep.
And the kind of, I think it would be a little bit like dramatic irony that Thane was supposed to be on the Death Star, right? And then he gets transferred out like last minute, and you're like, oh snap.
Yeah.
And then everything happens. Because he's on Dantooine, I believe, when he runs away. What do you guys think about Thane defecting?
I think it's perfect. It made me so
Good for
very
him.
happy.
Yeah. It's definitely the right move.
He saw them remember when he was on that planet I was talking about? I can't remember what the people were named, but they look kind of like an insect, if I remember right. And the Empire guys were like beating the children. And as they were handcuffing the children to go be slaves, the little human kids were jeering at them like, oh, that's what you get for defying the Empire. So they start doing their brainwashing and manipulating the children so young that they don't even see evil and slavery when they're older, because that's just all they've ever known. And Thane, he's not going to deal with that because he was subjugated and beat and basically had a horrible upbringing by some domineering entity. And so he's just not going to stay.
Yeah.
Thane has the bold idea of seeing slavery and deciding it's bad, which I think is very good for him. And I'm happy that he sees that as like, actually, I don't like this.
Yeah, Thane. Yeah, I feel like he just had enough and was like, okay, let's go. It's time. It's time to leave.
And Cyanna's a little tiny thing, like 5 foot, 100 pounds. And Thane, by the middle of the book, he's like 6'7", probably 300 pounds. So just in case people are wondering kind of what they look like, Thane's a redhead and Cyanna's dark with dark curly hair.
Yeah. I love their like conflicting, like they're just such good opposites, like even in size too, where like, that's such a great detail.
I agree. I love that they're like polar opposites but best friends. It's a very interesting story to follow.
And then again, because Thane's so big, you would think that he should be the one that sticks with the Empire. But in reality, that is very opposite of what actually
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah, definitely.
And yeah, if you have anything to say, anything to.
Nothing really besides what you guys are adding. Besides the comment, I love how like he doesn't like instantly defect. Like he's like, I need to take a breather after all this. Like I love how he just like takes off to this planet. And he's just like sitting down. He like, and he's just like again like I love how they use slavery as the like call sign for what's happening. He's just like of like, oh my god, this is just horrible. He's like, what am I doing? It's like that was the moment just kind of clicked in his mind. So yeah, you guys are adding great commentary about that.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
has the "Are we the baddies" moment, which is really fun.
Which is iconic.
Yeah. Then kind of just moving along, right after the destruction of the Death Star, this was my first like, oh my gosh, I didn't like my first like I guess you could say an aha moment of the book would be whenever Sienna is mission to go get Vader after he got kind of shot down. I thought that was like
I love that as
crazy.
well.
Yeah.
I thought that was such a like well done cameo. Do you guys have like
Mhm.
any comments on that?
I like how Vader threatened her. Basically, he's gonna watch her and know where she is and keep her close by because she actually saw him vulnerable. So if she were to tell
Mhm.
anybody, he'd probably just kill her
Yeah.
and the person she told.
Yeah. And Vader just kind of walks on the ship and it's like, move over, this is mine now.
It made them wait in the hold.
Yeah.
Yep.
He's like, actually, no, this is my ship. You guys can just go to the back while I drive because you guys suck.
It's like a good transition to Empire Strikes Back Vader.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So obviously, as I like subtle transition to Empire, we have Thane doesn't really instantly go right to the rebellion. He has like a career life as a smuggler. So obviously, I gotta ask, what are your thoughts on Thane's life before the rebellion? So I'll go to Gray this time.
So one thing I do love, I don't know if anybody has Thane gets on a ship when he's not doing smuggling because he joins a crew called the MOA, the Mighty Oak
Mhm.
Apocalypse, and they actually are doing runs to help people, bringing food places, taking less money. And so he was already like, oh, I'm starting to help people. I like this. And the Mighty Oak Apocalypse, the MOA, in Leia, Princess of Alderaan, when Leia has to hire a ship to go somewhere, she actually hires the MOA. I thought that was a funny little add-in. And the captain is a Wookiee, hence Mighty Oak Apocalypse.
Yeah. Lagara, yeah.
Yeah.
Never realized that before.
Yeah, so he was doing good stuff. He wasn't like smuggling spice or anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I do think it's kind of a rite of passage that you do have to go through a smuggling phase if you're going to eventually be in the rebellion. Like, even if it's smuggling, like, medicine, like, that is something you have to do briefly. Like, even if you're just on a cargo vessel, like, that's a necessary step, which I think is very important. But yeah, it's another great example of, like, I just, one of the things about Star Wars that I love is the Fern uses the term hope punk a lot, like this idea, like it's radical to be a good person and to have hope. And the way in which, the way that like, it's just sort of to combat this sort of like edgy, like dark nihilism of like, no, it's really radical, like wanting a better future for people. And the way that, this crew of people, he's like, wow, helping people feels good in a way that, nothing ever had felt this way before. And I love like that sort of development where you see someone help other people and like get that immediate response of like, oh, wow, this is amazing. I want to keep doing this. Mm-hmm. And I love that. And I just love seeing that represented in that way where like, generosity and kindness are very cool, and I would like to keep doing them. And I love that. I just think that's a great little touch where like it takes him a while. He doesn't immediately become a rebel, but what gets him in is not darkness, but light, where he's like drawn to it because it's good. It is good.
And Wedge Antilles recruits Thane.
Yes.
I think that's a great
Josh Hartnett. Wedge Antilles, Josh Hartnett. Google it. Just Google it. Google Josh Hartnett.
I totally
bring
will.
up a picture of Rebels, Wedge Antilles, and look at them, and you'll see what I mean.
But that's a good transition into what I want to ask about next. I just screwed that up. Obviously, that's a good transition to what I want to talk about next with Thane going to the rebellion. And I would say I'll turn this into more of like a general question of what do you think of like the rebels being so abrasive to Empire defectors in general and just in Lost Stars? I'll go to Julia first.
Sorry, my brain just short-circuited. Can you repeat that?
No, you're good. I asked, what do you think of the rebellion being so abrasive to Empire defectors throughout Lost Stars?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's thematically very in line with everything we've seen and everything that comes after, where like you don't see a lot of situations. I guess if people have examples, I'd love to hear them of like where people are wary and are like, no, like we don't want you here. Like you don't see that. And I think it's a great example of how the thing that always gets people in terms of like redemption or like becoming a better person is like connection with other people and like that kindness. I mean, what turns Vader back into Anakin briefly for a moment is love. Like that's the big thing that gets him. He's like, wait a second, no, I don't want my son to die. This is bad. I would like to stop this. And so seeing the rebellion be this very open, welcoming place where like, if you choose to mistreat or misuse their kindness, that's on you. Like they're not going to stoop to the level of like mistrust and tyranny and like oppression. They're going to be open, even if it is a little risky, because that's the value that they have, and it's also the thing that brings people in and keeps them there. And so I think it's very in line with everything we see in terms of how the Empire, the rebellion functions. I mean, obviously it's not perfect. We see that like people did quote unquote bad things or had to do questionable things for the rebellion, but they're not gonna. You're always welcome, which I think is really radical, and I love that. So,
yeah.
Saw Gerrera.
Yeah. Saw Gerrera's policy is a little bit more. I mean, I'm a Saw Gerrera defender, but he is not like the open house isn't as good. Like there, it's not as like the lemonade and cookies. There's not like snacks put out if you want to join his group. You kind of have to be ready to like fight. But yeah, definitely.
I like Rebels Saw. I don't like Borgullet Saw.
Borgullet.
Yeah.
No Borgullet.
Seems unnecessary.
Just a part I love that movie very much, except that one part.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just Saw Gerrera is just on a different level.
Yep.
Yeah. You might be the only Saw Gerrera stan I know.
I'm a Saw Gerrera fan. I love him in Clone Wars and Rebels. I think he's great.
Now, I think is different than stan, though.
Yeah.
Well, I heard fan, not stan. I don't know what that means.
It's like another level. I think a lot of people with Saw, I think you get the sense that like the Star Wars doesn't know necessarily what to do with him, and they kind of try their hardest to make him seem like dangerous. But the thing is that he's pretty much always right, and like he is willing. He right away knows the Empire is bad, and like he has these quote unquote more extreme methods. But I think it's a way of demonizing quote unquote extremism in ways that aren't always very convincing to me. And I also am always very suspicious of characters like Saw or like Mace Windu, where it's like, you don't like these characters who happen to be like Black men in this case, where I'm always a little bit, I think it's worth facing some of our biases. We're like, why is this guy supposed to be scary and radical, and like, what is the actual text? So that's my pitch for reevaluating Saw Gerrera. I know this is, again, very off topic.
Yeah.
But
Well,
Ezra
that's what I do
here.
him and is like, oh, I like Saw's point of view. I like the way Saw's doing this. We need some more, action like Saw. And then when they join him, one of my favorite episodes. But so Saw, I think he's an important character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
You constantly have to make him do crazy things that don't make it, like, I'm going to shoot this egg, and you're like, that's kind of, I don't know. Like, it seems like they realize that his politics might be, they're like, we don't know that we actually want to promote these actually radical politics. So we have to make sure he's
you need to do genocide on this. This is their last queen.
Yeah, and you're like,
destroy their entire civilization.
Yeah, sorry, I won't get into if you want to hear my actual political opinions about Saw Gerrera at some time, I can go into more detail, but I think you can't fool me. You can't fool me, Disney. I think you can't make me think he's a bad guy. You can't do it. I'm on to you.
Yeah, like Saw and Mace are very similar in the way that they're right. Like whenever Mace is talking to Anakin and is like, I don't trust this kid. He seems very unstable, blah, blah, blah. He's right. Yeah. He's not wrong. Like, everyone gets mad, but, like, Mace Windu's right. As much as you hate Mace Windu calling Ahsoka a civilian.
Yeah.
I didn't hate that. She chose that life.
She called herself one.
He was like, he's just, he comes off as brass because he doesn't coddle people's feelings. I don't think he's actually mean or harsh or anything. But like when I talk to people, because I don't understand a lot of people's like feel, like I don't know how to communicate sometimes, and it seems really brass and harsh when I'm just trying to get my point across.
Yeah.
It's not.
I think there's a lot of tone policing that goes into characters like Mace and Saw that I think are being motivated at some part by racial bias, where it's like, no, I don't like how they're saying it, and it's like, we have to consider why we feel that way, and I think that they're two characters to like really reconsider in the context of like, why do they have to deliver this in a method that's more acceptable, or like coddling your feelings. Yeah,
they saw a good guy in Bad Batch, and that's the most recent portrayal of him. So I don't think they are really trying to make us hate him. Maybe they're trying to turn the leaf on that. Maybe people are like, "Hey, we like this guy. Don't make him that bad."
It's me. I've been secretly blackmailing Disney this whole thing. I'm so sorry, guys.
No, you're good.
This is what happens when I'm teaching. Where like my students know, they're like, "We just mentioned something off topic. We can just sail off onto that." And don't
I feed on that, so I don't help out in that way at all.
No, you're good.
No, I'm very much.
No, because the conversation we're having is really interesting. It's just like it's making me think a lot. So it's like, I was just like, when you're adding the stuff about Mace and Saw, I was kind of like getting more and more intrigued the more you kept going down on it. So yeah, I had no problem with you guys going off topic. That was a really interesting conversation.
Yeah.
But
back to Lost Stars.
Yeah.
Where we left off. So Thane joins the rebellion with Wedge, and I guess kind of one of his first missions, he meets up with Dak, which I thought was really cool. She's like, "Oh my gosh, it's Dak." So on the Battle of Hoth, after the battle, touch on it, like when I hand it over, just touch on anything you guys want to about the Battle of Hoth. And Santa's going through the battle recordings, which I didn't know they did that. They just record battle like it's like an NFL game. They just go over the tape after the game. And she kind of recognizes Thane because of his insane piloting skills. So what are your guys' thoughts on that? So just the Battle of Hoth in general. Julia, if you want to go first.
Yeah, I think I really like Gray mentioned right at the beginning, like one of the things about Lost Stars that's so appealing is this from a certain point of view thing where you get to see these scenes that you know so well from a different point of view. And I think that on its own is really really fun. I think, in Empire you do get a sense of like the danger that they're in, and the sort of the need to escape, and sort of how sort of serious it is. And I think that this version of that scene really hits home more, because when you're with our sort of main characters like a Luke or a Leia or a Han, you kind of know they're going to be okay. Whereas there's a little bit more sort of Thane could die. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't, I'm not expecting him to be in another movie, right, where I think the stakes are higher. And yeah, Sienna recognizing his flying is like, I don't have anything to add other than that. I love that that's something that she would know. And I think it goes back to, like we were saying, establishing that as a bond that they have, and seeing that come back in as like a signature she would recognize. Also, I think is this the part where they mention but it comes up a couple times about the TIE fighters not having shields, and versus like the pilot. Is this what I'm remembering, where it comes up a little bit more in terms of pilots getting shot down, or she goes after a pilot? Does Sienna go after a pilot, or is that Thane that goes after a pilot?
Sienna saves Thane when they're...
Yeah, she saves
Yeah,
Thane.
yeah.
Yeah.
Is that what I'm
That's
thinking
a
of?
little
I don't remember
bit later,
I can't quite think of what you're trying to get at.
Yeah.
There's a scene. I'll see if I can find it. Carry on. Sorry, I'll see if I can find what I'm talking about here.
No, you're good.
No, you're fine.
I liked that Thane being working with the Empire was able to say that the weakest link was the ankles. And I thought that was a nice little tie-in to how Sienna was like, oh, they know the one weak link. And then she's like, wait a minute. And she sees that loop-de-loop thing that they did together with Thane. So I thought that was kind of fun. I don't know. Thane's friend, the Twilight guy, I think his name is Endor.
Oh, yeah.
And Endor.
Yeah.
He becomes a senator. He's a friend that helps Leia in the Bloodline book. And he's carried on all through the Star Wars trilogy. That's a great guy there.
Oh, wow.
Didn't know about that.
I forgot about that guy. Yeah, that's right.
He's also in Clone Wars.
Oh, really?
When?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I'd have to find it and find the episode. I'll try to do that.
When is it? Do you like what season?
I can't. It's during a Ryloth episode.
So it's like season 1, like episode. It's like
Yeah.
So I can come. I probably can place it arc wise where it could be. Yeah, so it's season 1.
I think so.
Huh.
But I know he's come up in a couple books, the novels and stuff. So I find that pretty fun.
I never knew about that.
Cool. Neither did I.
Yeah, when Leia needs to hide in Bloodline, she has him hide her.
Huh.
Huh.
I think it's Bloodline.
Interesting.
I love when things connect. That's so fun.
It could be Resistance Rising or Resistance Reborn that Endor's in. Might not be Bloodline.
Okay.
Sorry.
I have not read either of those. I will have to.
That's
They're
definitely
good.
on my list now.
Yes. So after the Battle of Hoth, Thane and Sienna meet up on Jellucan, and things get a bit frisky.
Spicy. They're spicy.
For one night. I think it's a pretty big part in the book. I know that's like the part where after they're done, it's like, well,
Sienna
nice knowing you.
to get him back because he's a defector. So the Empire sends Sienna to retrieve Thane on, wherever he is, and she realizes that he would be on Jellucan.
Yeah.
And so she goes to Jellucan and finds him at a seedy bar.
Yeah.
And that's like, I think the first time in the book where you're just like, they have to be together, but they can't. And it's like The end of that scene is so incredibly sad.
They did kiss once back after they rekindled their friendship after the thing we were talking about where they were
ion
friends for a while, the ion cannon mishap.
Yeah.
And so they did make up and share one kiss before this part of the book.
Gray, if you want to go first.
So Thane says he quit using his beard suppressant, so he's probably looking all scruffy.
I love beard suppressant. I'm so glad you brought it up. It's one of those things that, again, where I'm like, did I make this up? Is this from a fan fiction or is this canon? And then I'm like, I remind myself, no, beard suppressant is real and it exists. You didn't make it up. Thank you for bringing up beard suppressant. I love it so much.
And so without he's always had Sienna by his side for his education and to strive to work with the Empire. And then he went to the academy. And so he has all these rules that keep him on to where he's supposed to go and what he's supposed to do. And for the first time in his life, he's just like got no compass. He doesn't know what he's doing, where he's going. He's not recruited yet to the rebellion or anything like that. He hasn't even gone on the MOA. This is the first place where he leaves the Empire. And he had this conversation with Sienna saying, he was like, well, he was trying to tell her that he was leaving the Empire and that she needs to come with him, but he was going in a roundabout way because the Empire monitors their communications. And then she interpreted it a different way where he thought she was going to leave the Empire with him and she thought she was going to finish out her 5 years and then they were going to meet together when they were done, and come to find out where he thinks they're on the same page is to leave the Empire. And there was no rebellion at this point. He just wanted to leave the Empire. And then when she finally finds him, she's like, Thane, what have you done? And he's just like, oh. And he realizes that they're not on the same page and that Sienna has no interest in leaving the Empire. And he's heartbroken and pissed and he's just been like for a couple weeks now, just aimless.
He's like
running out of money.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And Julia, same thing.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is tragic, and I think Gray just gave this really beautiful analysis. I do have to bring up something Camilla at Barikwa Wookie talks about all the time, which is the obligatory YA novel thing before two characters hook up, where like it's the same, it's described in the same way, where like they want to present the importance of consent, which is great, but they always write it in like the exact same way, where like one of the characters is like, are you sure? And then the other character is like, yes, I want this. And you're like, okay, can we come up with a different way to like to do this?
They got to put in the consent part in a YA.
But they just need to come up with a different way of doing it, because it's done the same way in every YA novel. And you get that here where it's like, I think maybe we should come up with a different method of, because I love that YA novels, want to impress the importance of consent, but I think it's like very cliche to have like, usually if it's like, heterosexual couple, have the guy be like, are you sure? And then have the girl be like, yeah, no, I want this. I'm like, okay, can we mix it up a little bit? Maybe like, let's do something a little different. So it's a very, I'm glad that they have. I do think it's great then too to see Thane immediately be like, "I'm sorry, I just want everyone to know." Like I had later, has contact with her, and I can't remember the exact line where it's like, "You went and met with the, for." This is what you like, really? Like you would do this? And I love that they sort of break the rules for each other, no matter what, and sort of seeing how that changes over time.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I thought it was sweet when he was like, when he finally made love to Sienna, and he was like, it's not that I'm discovering that I love her now, it's that I've always loved her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that was a sweet little line.
It's just,
that is very true.
Again, I would argue that this section right here is kind of like the heart. I would say the heart and soul of this novel. Right? Like everything, like that you want from Lost Stars is in this little like one night stand section. Just like it's just I find it to be like nearly perfect.
I think wording it as a one night stand diminishes their
Yeah.
love for each other, though, because that sounds kind of like
Yeah.
just a one night
Yeah.
stand, but they actually are in love, and I think it's worded very well.
Yeah, I refer to, I jokingly say that I think it would be funny. It's my brand. If Corky is a one-shot baby, where like Obi-Wan and Sabine has like one time, and so I refer to that as their one night of passion. So this is, I guess, the type of wording that we could use for Thane and Sienna if we want to adopt it. But Star Wars has sort of slowly started to be less sort of puritanical about these types of things, which is interesting because, like, usually in the past, it's like, no, we got to make sure that we know that these characters are married and then they have a baby. We need to be very clear about these sort of more traditional ideas of relationships where you don't see a lot of casual relationships. Not that this is casual by any means. They are, very deeply in love with each other, but it's kind of a way in which that more like realism, I feel like it feels very realistic, which I really like. That this is the type of thing that could happen, and it's a type of realism that I like to see included.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then Sienna, he was like, "Oh, are you going to turn me into the Empire?" And she has a hard time because she's committed to the Empire, but she's also committed to Thane. And so she tells Thane she's going to give him a week, and then she's going to turn him into the Empire.
Yeah.
And when they part, she goes back to the Empire, but she doesn't turn him in. She actually fakes his suicide.
Yeah.
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 And so that's the only time you see her lie or do anything against her Empire. And Thane does not know about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He thinks he's mad at her. Like, not just kind of mad because he's talking to Tendi later. He's like ultra pissed because Tendi actually leaves the Empire and joins the rebellion as well. And she's like, how did you leave the rebellion and Sienna actually stay? How can she stay after the Death Star and after this and after that? And she's mad at Sienna. And then she's also mad that Sienna didn't leave the Empire, but yet she lied for Thane. And it just...
Definitely.
Yeah.
And that's like Sienna's whole, like, which is why it could be kind of hard to, like, kind of stand with Sienna's decisions, is because if she's all about this loyalty and then she goes and lies, like, why can't you just do that again and leave the Empire?
And that's what Candy's point was.
Yes.
Or Tendi.
Yeah, it's like you're like, you're doing this once. Why are you being so weird about it? If I don't, it's just like her morals seem a little bit flawed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I did watch a interview with Claudia Gray, and she did say there's no movie or show or sequel in the works, so that kind of bums me out.
No.
Especially the end. All right. Well,
that's my beef with the book. The end just drops off. It abruptly ends.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess like the sequel, which we'll kind of talk about a little bit later, but like the sequel would just be really sad, I feel like.
Yeah.
it would be Sienna's war crime trial.
She's going to be in jail. And
they just need it in the background of a story. Like maybe Sienna Reed is out and helping the rebellion somehow, and it just
make a deal. Just make a deal. Do it. Come on.
Yeah.
Please.
Anyway.
No, you're good. So obviously after this, like, all this events that we just described, with Sienna faking their suicide, or Thane's suicide, we obviously have one of the key moments of the original trilogy of Thane getting sent off with Corona Squadron to go investigate the rumors from the Bosman spies that the second Death Star is there. And we have this intense sequence of Sienna getting told by why am I forgetting Piet to go into the TIE fighter to go investigate because they know the X-Wings are there, and we have this intense sequence of Thane and Sienna getting the ship encounter. So I was going to ask, what are your guys' thoughts on that? I'm going to go to Gray first.
Once again, my dog stole a pillow that
Oh.
is not for him to destroy, and I do need to grab it from him. So I'm
No,
going to
you're
do
good.
that very briefly so he doesn't eat this pillow.
Sorry.
We did skip a part that I thought was kind of important when Sienna and Nash go to sabotage the Millennium Falcon on
yeah.
Bespin. I thought that was just an important part to come out. So in the original trilogy, when Han Solo goes to Bespin to meet Lando, Vader knows about it because you know he's there, and Vader told Sienna and Nash to sabotage the hyperdrive of the Millennium Falcon before they leave, and then the Millennium Falcon just flies off Bespin, and Sienna's like, he's going to murder us. He doesn't.
Yeah.
But it was just another cool little crossover in the original series of this book that I just thought was really, really neat.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Yeah, I
had to remember that part.
That's a good thing to bring up.
Yeah, definitely. That's an interesting thing to bring up because, that it's important in the grand scheme of things. Of that, like, it adds back that, like, Empire Strikes Back dread you feel at the end when Vader walks by Piet and you're like, he could have just killed him right then and there, but he doesn't. It kind of adds that into the book as well, because she's like, I'm the one that caused this, and I'm getting away with it. So I find that like a very interesting like thing that you added into that. That is important, but also is not as important. But again, going back to the Return of the Jedi with Thane and Sienna having their ship-to-ship encounter when Thane and Quarter Squadron are trying to figure out the second Death Star. I was going to ask back to that. What are your thoughts on that? Gray?
So I thought, this is the first time Nash Windrider is aware that Thane is alive, because Thane is one of the rebel X-Wings that they sent the TIE fighters out to check on. And obviously the Empire knows that they're rebels, but they say that there might be rebels. And then Piet tells Sienna to let one of the rebels go, but don't tell anybody else. And so her and Nash and a couple other TIE fighters come up and they meet Thane. And Thane's like, this place isn't big enough for the both of us. And Nash is like, what, Thane? And Nash just immediately gets so angry that he wants to murder Thane that second. And Sienna has to like figure out a way to let somebody live. And of course she wants it to be Thane and not the other person. And so she ends up like flying in front of Nash and cutting him off and then giving Thane that chance to get out of there. Yeah. And then Nash is like, oh, you must have been as mad as I was and wanted to kill him more than me. That's why you made that mistake in your flying. He didn't know that she was purposely letting him go, but he was just so angry.
Yeah. Again, that was probably the most tense I felt of that entire book, because I didn't know how that encounter was going to go down. Like, when that was happening, I was like, oh my god, this is going to end poorly. Because I thought Sienna wasn't going to succeed, and that's how it was going to get, like, this dark, depressing. But, like, when he started going more and more, you're just like, oh my god.
Yeah.
That's probably, like, the most my heart was just beating during that entire section. I was just like, wow.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and like you guys said, we don't know if these guys, like, the thing about this book is that's different from, like, other books, like Ahsoka. We know how Ahsoka's going to end up. We have no clue how Thrain Krell's story's going to end up. So it makes a lot of suspense in the book.
Yeah, definitely. Julia, do you have any extra thoughts on this?
Julia is...
Oh, still FK. I just heard it look over.
Yeah. Yeah, and then, like, I guess that's kind of like the same thing, like, Thane or Sienna's true intentions to cover up.
Yeah.
What she actually meant was just a really interesting part of the book. Do you have anything else to touch on that? Gray.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
I,
Oh, perfect.
Sorry,
timing.
I'm back. I needed to find my computer charger. My computer is dying, and I
no, you're
had
good.
to. Oh, there's my dog with his squeaky toy. Man, I'm just professional.
Did you hear?
I heard part of it.
Yeah, so we're just talking about their ship-to-ship encounter, and then like, what do you think
Yeah.
about Sienna's true intentions? Because Nash thinks that like she didn't mean to kind of let him go, but then in reality, she just let Thing go.
Yeah, I mean, I think seeing that, you know, what Sienna's weakness is staying sort of consistent throughout the books. That's just another example of like, because then at the end, right, like that's the thing where he like weaponizes that against her, where her love for him is the only thing that sort of ever gets her to change course, and he weaponizes that at the end. And so I think it's another good building block to see how he's really the only thing that she will sort of break the rules for. So yeah, those are my thoughts.
Yeah.
So obviously, going past that a little bit, we have, I would say, another portion, a big portion that is set before the Battle of Endor. We have Sienna going back to Jellican to deal with her mother's trial and that whole sequence of events, and Sienna meeting up with her father and like having a whole conversation, and then they're like, hey, we need somebody else from Jellican to help with the trial to help like confirm this, and then she opens the door and Thane's there. I was gonna ask what your thoughts on that whole situation, Julia, since you got back.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good example of how, like, as I was mentioning earlier, how Sienna's culture gets sort of twisted to be used for the Empire, where you see this, like, cultural practice where they have to have someone, right? Like, they have to have someone in the house. Is that the tradition?
Flag put into the little box of sand next to the house that they're going to stand with the family during this time of dishonor.
Yeah. And so you see how like Thane takes up the sort of true honor and takes up that role, and how this machine, this Empire, has taken this cultural practice of hers, of her people, and turned it, twisted it into something that is used to like destroy her own family. And it's so tragic, but I love seeing how, like I said, like it's a noble virtue. It's a beautiful sort of practice of the support for this community, showing a support for each other, and the Empire destroys it and makes it this thing that keeps her tied to them. And to see Thane, pick it up in sort of the way it's meant to be is really beautifully done. So I love getting little bits of like individual cultures throughout the galaxy where you see little practices or communities and how things are different. I love those little moments. So that's why the reason I love Phasma is I'm like, it's wild.
I love Phasma.
I'm like, it's terrible. These people's lives are miserable, but it's fascinating because you get to see these little, like when we see these planets that seem like they're more cosmopolitan and they've clearly connected, and there's sort of this way in which human cultures especially are sort of similar, but you to see these diverse communities of people who have these different ways of life and different cultures and different religions. And it's so amazing to see that. So I love getting to see like traditional Jalukan sort of beliefs. And I love a little, window into these different ways of life. So that was really a part of the book that I understated that I really like to see.
Yeah.
Gray. So
Sienna's mom was framed by an Imperial as taking money because she was like an accountant or something. She was a manager at a plant, and the head Imperial was smuggling money from the operation and framed Sienna's mother for it, and then put the mother on trial. And Sienna found out about it and asked to go home. And when she went home, her father was just emaciated and tired because somebody is supposed to always stay awake at the house when they're in this time of dishonor. and he had been there for days, and the mom has been in jail, and so he's had to stay awake and work his job for the Empire at the same time. So Sienna comes home and feeds him, and she's just like, Dad, are there none of the clan are standing with us? And he motions just outside, kind of like, do you see any flags out there? So she's just like, man, this is just as dishonorable as it comes, and she's just brokenhearted, and she knows that there's nothing she can do for her mom. And then that's when Thane knocks on the door with a flag, and he's like, when she opens the door, like, oh, somebody's gonna stand up for us, and it's Thane, like Julia said, and he's like, I remember you telling me I could just put this red flag into the ground as that I'm standing by you. And for their the little part of this is, if somebody is at your house, they automatically have to protect them. So Sienna, he is like, are you going to tell the Empire on me? But she can't tell the Empire on him because she cannot. That is their tradition. And so and Thane doesn't know that Sienna knows he's in the rebellion yet. This part happened just before the one we just talked about. And so she's acting all cold to him and mean and grumpy. And he's like, oh, she must know. And then, come to find out she does know.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think this part solidifies that, like, Sienna's been completely brainwashed.
Yeah.
And like, it shows just how the Empire is using, like Julia has been saying a few times, like using this kind of good trait that she has and turning it against her and ultimately making her just a pawn of the Empire.
Well, but that's not the only person who brainwashed her. Her dad did too, because she's like, how can you stand against Mama? And he's like, how dare you talk down to your Empire? It doesn't matter what your mom does. We still have to follow our like everything that we've committed to. And so the reason Sienna's so like radicalized and willing to lose her mom in the process is because her dad is too, and that's who raised her. He is like, well, I mean, I guess this is what's happening to her, and because this is our belief, I have to stand by it. And so she's been totally manipulated on both fronts to be this way.
Yeah.
I don't think she ever could have not been.
People's dads in Star Wars, not doing a great job. This is why Bail Organa remains unparalleled in dad skills.
The best guy ever.
No one comes close. I mean, look, is it a competition? Not really. Most people's dads in Star Wars
He's space
are
daddy.
bad. But Bail does a great job. Dad of the century,
Galaxy.
probably. Yeah, exactly. So, people's dads in this book are just, I mean, the way that, like, Thane, I don't remember which of you mentioned that, like, he's like, the Empire's like my dad, who sucks, so I will leave. Like, it's just, Thane's daddy issues are what get him to leave the Empire. So, but yeah, I had totally forgotten, Gray, about her own dad being kind of the model of like, nope, we've committed, we can't go back now. So that's a really great point.
And the mom actually gets shipped off to spice mines and is sentenced to like 3 years of hard labor, which nobody survives more than one. So she's basically worked to death, and it's never addressed again. Sienna stays in the Empire.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Real quick, shout out to Luke in the chat. Shout out to Podon's podcast and Element 7. Thank you guys all for joining us. We only have a little bit left, but
definitely.
we appreciate you guys tuning in.
So, obviously we have this section right here with the trial, and then after that we go a little bit more forward, and we have the whole Battle of Endor, which for the most part I would say is kind of like A New Hope with the beginning, where it's like, we have a couple like a little bit key moments, but overall I wouldn't say it's as important. And the main thing that happens is obviously it's the destruction of the second Death Star.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
sorry, I'm talking to my dog.
No, you're good.
Ignore me.
So we have the destruction of the second Death Star, and we have the moment where like Sienna decides like, I'm gonna start flying again because I want to be a part of that, and then she gets injured because of the explosion, and then obviously she gets set on this duty of like having to basically write like notes to all the families of like the people that died on the Death Star, and like she gets like this like pity rank, and she's just like I don't deserve being commander, like this is horrible, like this is like horrific, and yeah, like that type of moment. So I was gonna ask like, what are you guys' thoughts on basically Sienna like looking around being like, this is not what the Empire used to be at all. So
Yeah, sorry.
No, you're gonna have to say I was gonna go to Gray first.
Sorry. Yeah, I lost my train of thought when I interrupted you, and I was like, oh dang it.
You're good.
I lost my train of thought.
Yeah.
Julia, could you take over for a second?
Sure. I mean, I think she doesn't feel like, to get a rank like that you didn't earn, is like very against everything that she believes. I also love, hi, do you want to be on the podcast?
Yes.
Come here.
Yes, dog
Come here.
cameo.
Come here. I have your toy. Come here. Come here. Come on. Come here. He wants me to chase him. Are you going to actually? Nope. Okay. Well, we'll see. Professor, we'll see. If
Maybe in a bit.
To see how, like, at the end of Return of the Jedi, it's just like, yay, it's teddy bear party. It's fine. The Empire's defeated. But, like, no, like, something that had its claws in the entire galaxy like that and was the functioning government and was, like, in control of, like, how everything ran for the most part, other than, the worlds that had been sort of liberated. It's going to take a while for things to actually, and we're seeing this now with The Mandalorian as well. And I know Aftermath, and there's sort of this building up of, like, we have the Battle of Jakku, which is really the thing that ends it. And seeing that it's not just this clear-cut happy ending, that empires fall apart sort of a little bit more slowly than we expect. And seeing Sienna see that and see it sort of leave the bitter taste in her mouth, and feeling like, yeah, she doesn't deserve this, and it's no longer this glorious empire. And I love seeing a more realistic depiction of what actually would happen if this massive empire collapsed. Like, it would take a while for things to really fall apart to the extent that it's no longer functioning.
Yeah, definitely.
Gray, did you retain your thought?
No, I didn't have a lot to add to that. I didn't have a lot to add to it. I didn't ever get my train of thought back. I'm sorry.
No, that's perfectly fine. It's perfectly fine.
I feel guilty.
Let's see if I can grab my.
Oh, I'm like
my
a
boy
squirrel.
here.
I'll have a train of thought, and if I just go like that, it can disappear and never come back.
All right, Buster.
Oh, how cute.
Oh, what's his name?
This is Buster. Hi, do you want to be on the podcast? Do you have any thoughts on Lost Stars by Claudia Gray? Hi.
He said, I want a treat.
Hi. You have a red beard like Thane.
Oh, yeah.
One for...
Yeah. All right. Thanks for showing. Thanks for saying hi.
We love doggos.
Yeah.
So then the climax of the story, at least I would say, the Battle of Jakku, had me in tears while reading. It's so powerful, and like Claudia Gray does such a good job with this whole scene, and I want to get your guys' thoughts on what really stood out to you guys in the Battle of Jakku.
Everything stood out to me in that section of the book. That's where I couldn't think of it, my old thought, because I was so excited to talk about this.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember the experience of reading the end of it, because it was kind of later in the evening, and I was like, oh, am I going to finish this book today or not? Like, we'll see. And then I got to that part, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, I have to finish this. And I was just like awake at 2:00 in the morning, being like, what do I do now? Like, what do I do now? How do I just go on with the rest of my day? the way in which it's so easy to sort of visualize, and like I was saying earlier, Zane is like, I am the only thing you care about. Fine, we're both going to die on the ship then. And she's, no, you got me.
Cyan is a captain of a Star Destroyer. That was the promotion. That's what I was going to say. I'm sorry. She's the captain of a Star Destroyer, and they're over the Battle of Jakku, which I love. It's in the Aftermath series a lot. And earlier in the book, when she was in the academy, they were talking about if the ship gets boarded, what is the best thing to do? And some people said, eject all your people out the little safety pods and, try to get off the ship. And the one that the Empire wants you to do is to crash your ship, destroy your ship, go down with your ship so that the rebellion doesn't take your ship. And it just so happens that the one boarding the ship, the rebels boarding the ship, is Thane and Tendi or Kendi. And when he hears, everybody off the ship, and he's like, oh my gosh, that's Sienna. And when they were going to leave the ship because they hear that they're going to destroy it, Thane is just takes off running.
Yeah.
And he knows his way to the bridge. And so when he gets to the bridge, Sienna had evacuated everybody and locked the whole bridge down with a phrase.
Boom,
and
boom.
he just happened to know it. And it was, look through my eyes.
Oh.
Yeah.
And when the door opens, Sienna's sitting there ready to die with her ship. And she wants to die because this gets her out of out of the rebellion. It takes away all the bad things she's done, the loss of her mom and all this stuff. She's like, this is my way out. And Thane knows that. And Thane has been wearing a mourning band for an entire year. He thought, when Sienna got hurt, he thought she died. And he doesn't know she's alive. And so when he runs up there, he's like, oh my gosh, she's alive. And he basically opens up the door, and she's like, of course, the only person who knew this is the one to board my ship.
Yeah. That's the Force, baby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So somebody could take it from there if they would love, if they want.
I'm a big fan of the way in which this book subverts the expectation of like a redemption. Like, she doesn't get to die. She doesn't get the quote unquote easy way out of like doing this one last thing to kind of get out of it. She has to deal with the consequences. And this is why I do want a sequel, because I want to see someone actually having to face the
trial.
sort of,
Yeah.
exactly. Like, I want to see that, because I do think fundamentally she is not an evil person, right? I do think she would be able to sort of have complex thoughts about what she's done. And I do like that, it doesn't go the way you're expecting. We're like, oh, she's going to die, and, it'll be a way out. And, quote, not really a redemption, but it's sort of similar to that. But no, she has to deal with being alive. And that's a trope that you do see occasionally, where a character has to deal with the consequences of life and the challenges that it brings to have to face what you've done. And I love that. And I would love to see more of that. And I know it's, could be enough to just imagine it, but
it's not enough for me.
No, I do need to see it. I do want Sienna Reeves' War Crimes Star Wars story. I do want that very badly.
And she's not going to turn coat. She's not going to get a leaner sentence by helping the rebellion out. She would never do that. Yeah. So no matter what, she's going to stay in jail and go to trial.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if any of you had to read The Crucible in high school. I don't know if that's something that's still
I didn't go to school
in every high school.
Yes, I had to read The Crucible.
I didn't.
Carter, have you read it? Where you're just like, John Proctor, just do it. Just say that you're a witch. Just confess, because your pregnant wife is going to be alone. Like, just do it. And he's like, I can't lie. It goes against everything I believe. And but that's that's his tragic flaw. It's similar to Sienna's, where they have this belief, they have this, quality that they won't betray even when it's objectively wrong for them to keep holding on to it. And I love that. It's complex, and it's not, it gives us a really messy ending. And I mean that in a good way, where like, it's a realistic depiction of like, nope, this is, having to deal with, being alive to deal with your crimes. And I really appreciate that.
And I liked when, so Thane saves Sienna in the crash. He like grabs her, runs to a pod and ejects themselves, and they slam into the ground. And he was looking at her. She's knocked out, and he's looking at her and he's like, oh, maybe the Force is real. And Thane, this critic and never would believe in the Force, and he's just and he's like, oh, maybe the Force is real. They brought us back together, and the hatch opens with the rebels to help him out. And he's like, oh, and he gives him her beat up Sienna, and they shackle her and take her away because she is a war criminal, captain of a Star Destroyer, and he's just like, no such thing as the Force,
Yeah.
Oh, such a good scene.
Well, they're like beating the crap out of each other. They're like,
they did beat the literal crap out of each other.
Yeah, they're just like,
it reminds,
boom.
I don't know why, but it did kind of give me, I don't know if you watched Game of Thrones, like Jaime and Brienne, where they're just like, no, I will not let you do this dumb, noble thing, and like, I'm going to fight you because I care about you so much, and I do love
you as I punch you in your face.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's really fun to see the idea that you would fight someone to save their life. I just think that's very powerful.
I agree.
Yeah, I like the idea. Yeah.
When I first initially was reading it, I thought they're both going to die in the crash because I kept looking at the cover, I'm like, this is how it's going to end.
Wait.
So that's what I thought originally while I was reading it, and then when that happened, I was like, oh, thank God. And then you have the question of like, what's next, that kind of thing. And again, the climax of Lost Stars is just what makes it so good. It subverts your expectations in like nearly every single way.
Yeah, and it's just the fact, again, you just don't know like what's gonna happen. You have no clue.
That's why I said it was my beef. It's not really a beef. It's the fact that I don't want just my imagination to fill these gaps in. I want to know what happens.
Yeah, which maybe we'll have to bribe Claudia Gray with a lot of money.
I'm a little worried now that she's writing another book with Star in the title. I have concerns.
Yes.
R.I.P. R.I.P. Starlight Beacon. I'm worried Stellan's name is derivative of Star. Like, there's a lot there that could go. So her track record with Star is pain, and so I'm just kind of prepared for that eventuality. Once it finally appears.
I'm also on the Starlight Beacon's gonna be done train.
It's not. It doesn't exist. So what happened to it?
Right? Yeah, it does exist. And what better way than in Fallen Star?
Definitely.
But Lost Stars is an amazing book. Do you guys have any closing thoughts on?
Yeah, I do. The very end, like at the very, very end, after Sienna's in jail and she says bye to Thane, they skip on to Nash Windrider, and they are meeting up with empires throughout the galaxy in the outer reaches or something, and he actually is training and working for the Empire, building up the First Order. So Nash Windrider, the Alderaanian who lost his planet, is the one who's probably with like Ray Sloan building up the First Order. And I thought that was kind of brutal at the end. And he's doing it for Sienna. It's all for Sienna because he thinks Sienna died tragically when Thane saved her, and so he's just like, I'm gonna make this empire the greatest, and I'm gonna be like Sienna, and I'm gonna, and I thought that was kind of a very tragic ending in that manner of Nash. And then we never talked about how Mothma held back Thane's hair while he puked his guts out in the toilet
such a
at
good moment.
the rebel base.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was a funny little thing to add in.
Yeah, I mean, she's got that mom haircut, so I feel like it's in keeping with what we know about her. She does look like my mom, so I'm sorry, but like when I think of Mon Mothma, I'm like, that's what my mom looks like. So that's what I think of when I see her. But yeah, I was also gonna say there's that moment where Nash is like, so do you want to like hook up? And Tina's like, no.
Yeah,
that was such a weird moment.
Like, no, you suck and are terrible. Like I know, like we're on the same side, but no.
Yeah, Nash got friend zoned pretty bad.
Yeah. That's
If they're even
fine.
friends, like he just got zoned.
she just tolerates.
He got colleague zones. Yeah.
But if I was to say anything, is I would love to see what happens to Sienna, and I'd love to see these characters and in the future. It doesn't have to be a show, or it could be the background of a book, a novel, a comic. I would just like to know what happened.
Yeah,
definitely.
Agreed.
Yeah, I agree. I think that would be the way to go about it instead of writing a whole book where, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that needs to happen, but in a way, I don't know if I would want a whole book about it, but maybe like a couple chapters here and there in whatever.
Yeah.
Well, they could be like side characters in another character story, like of like Imperial defectors.
Yeah. Lost Stars.
Aw.
Lost
Lots of stars.
Even more lost.
Star.
Element 7 in this chat says, Lost Stars to me, how Padme would confront Anakin in an ideal world with Anakin ending in shackles.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I agree.
that's
I totally agree with that.
If she was physically capable of fighting Anakin, she would. You know what I mean? Like if she was trained in the Jedi arts, she would fight him. And I think that's her. Yes, I do think she would fight him. The original. I love the original concept of her like showing up with a knife and being like, nope, I can't allow this. And the scene that was cut from Revenge of the Sith, where they're sitting around, it's like Bail and Mon Mothma and Padme and like starting a rebellion. I truly think that, like, especially now having read the Padme books by E.K. Johnston, we're like trying to justify that what I know about her with what we see in the movies, where I'm like, no, I think she would fight Anakin. Like, I do think she would. And I
love Padme. I just never thought she would fight Anakin.
Yeah, I think
anybody but Anakin, in my opinion.
And I guess I would like to think that she would do what needed to be done for her children, especially, and would fight for them and do what needs to be done to protect them. And so I agree. That's my ideal world where she's,
Oh, I agree too. I also agree.
Yeah. Child with a gun, Phantom Menace, Padme would fight Anakin 100%.
Yeah.
Oh,
that version of
sure.
Padme.
For sure. I agree that. I just meant by the time she fell in love with him and progressed through the movies, I don't think at that point she would have. But in Phantom Menace,
that child would fight fully grown Darth Vader.
The only reason that makes me think that she wouldn't do that is because when he slaughtered all the sand people, the women and the children, she gave him a hug.
I just personally like to think that anytime Padme is written by a man, it's not canon. So
I can totally hop on that boat, man.
I just pretend that it doesn't. That didn't happen, but you're totally right. Where she does have a weakness to his worst qualities. That does happen. I just pretend it doesn't.
She's one of my favorite characters. I thoroughly love Padme. I think she's just such a strong, independent woman. So
if you haven't read the books by E.K. Johnston, highly recommend. They're amazing. The Queen's Hope coming out, Clone Wars era Padme. I'm so excited. That's gonna be so good.
Yeah, it's gonna be awesome. I also need to get caught up on those. I'll probably have those in the next
She was in one of the Thrawn books
next
too,
wave.
a lot.
Yeah.
I did.
She was like,
I don't know which one though.
it's Thrawn Alliances, the second one.
I like the Thrawn books, but they don't entice me like a lot of the other books.
Yeah, I have to kind of be in a mood for a Thrawn book because like it's very like politically heavy and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I can throw Lost Stars on when I'm cleaning and doing anything and certain stuff, but that one's here and there.
Yeah,
Definitely.
but
Yeah.
all right.
I think we had the end of the
I
show
think
for this
it's-
one. So
Yeah, it's a good.
oh, sorry, you go.
Okay. Thank you guys for joining. Shout out to everyone in the chat. Just real quick, we have Pods on Podcast, Element 7, Luke, Char J, Scholar, X-Core Gamer Skills. And yeah, thank you guys all for joining. This was a great conversation. I had a lot of fun, as I'm sure you guys did. So just to kind of close things out, again, who are you? Where can we find you? And what canon book are you most excited about that is coming up in the near future? Gray, if you want to go first.
I wish I knew what canon books were coming out in the near future. I don't actually know at this moment. But I'm Gray on Donna the Gray on TikTok. And I just like to do a lot of book reviews with all my friends.
All right. And Julia?
Yeah, I'm Julia Christine on TikTok, Star Wars English Class podcast with co-host with Fern. I'm most excited for Queen's Hope. So that's the third in the Padme trilogy by E.K. Johnston coming out in November. And it is set during the Clone Wars. And so you're giving me Clone Wars Padme content. Like I couldn't ask for anything more. If it's entirely possible it takes place before 19 BBY. So if I get Satine in this book, I will cry because she and Padme were friends. Like she could be in this book. Like there's a lot that I'm looking forward to. I personally believe that Padme is the one who told Satine about Obi-Wan's fake funeral. So I, in an ideal world, get her telling him about. We get the deception arc in this book is my dream for Queen's Hope. But yeah, that's definitely it's coming out in a couple months. So very much looking forward to that one.
Yeah, that should be exciting. Hereth, same thing to you.
Like I say, every week you can find me at Hereth Productions on TikTok and Hereth Productions on YouTube. And Carter?
And then obviously here. So I'm Carter. You can find me at CartTD2 on TikTok. Obviously here on YouTube at They Fly Now every Monday. And that's about it. Again, a few weeks from now, we will be we're going to look completely different.
Yeah.
Start uploading to Spotify. More consistent uploads on TikTok because we do upload just in random spurts. We'll post like 10 videos in a day and then not post for the next 2 weeks. But yeah, for season 2, which I guess is what we're going to kind of call it, we're going to be looking completely different and hopefully expanding the account a lot. So we thank you guys all for joining us. Next week will be on the Darksaber. We're going to be talking about everything in the Darksaber, from the history of the Darksaber to Clone Wars, to Rebels to Mando. It's going to be awesome. We have some great guests on, and we hope you guys can all join us. So
I will be there.
Yeah. Awesome. We appreciate it. But yeah, thank you guys both for joining us. Thank you everyone in the chat, and may the force be with you.
Always.
Bye.